We're going to talk a lot about mental health literacy. We're going to talk a little bit about the mental health trifecta, which helps to keep you well. We're going to talk about positive self-talk. We're going to talk about a little bit of a change of pace, so breaking up the monotony. And we're going to talk about volunteerism. And the last thing we're going to talk about is wellness goals.
So just to set the stage for today, and whenever we're talking about mental health, we want to think of how can we create the conditions for optimal mental health. And the best metaphor that I can use, connects with me, is thinking of kind of a gardening, a flower metaphor, or is thinking of, it's not just the seed or yourself that we need to be looking at. We need to look at the ecosystem that is around you, and what are the things that we need to really enrich in that soil so that then you can flourish and grow and thrive. We are in a unpredictable, I don't know if I would say chaotic time, but it's unpredictable. There's a lot of stress and anxiety out there, but we need to, some of these tips we're going to talk about, and there's obviously lots more, is how can we keep on adding more fertility into the soil so then we can grow and we can flourish and thrive in these unprecedented times. So just keep that in the back of your head. That's what we're kind of the big theme we're looking at is how can we really create the optimal conditions for your mental health. And our first topic, one of 6, we're going to go over mental health literacy. This may be a review for some of you. If you're familiar with the mental health curriculum, I know it's been around for quite a while and it's been used throughout our district and throughout the province. But I think it's a good reminder to just break down the different states of mental health. Myself as a mental health professional, I still hear, particularly in the pandemic, people using terminology that may not be the correct terminology to explain the stress that's going on and so on. So if we look at the bottom of the triangle, we could be in a state of no distress, problem, or disorder. So we're relaxed, we're calm, we're thoughtful, we're pensive. There's no real stress or anxiety going on. We could be in a state of mental distress, and this happens to us every single day, everyone. None of us are immune to this. We could be feeling upset or annoyed or sad or unhappy. We could be running late for work. Yesterday when I was doing a virtual session, for some reason, the invite I sent out to everyone, it didn't go out. So about 10 minutes before my session, I'm getting ready and I'm getting emails and messages. Where's the link? Where's the invite? So I was in a state of mental distress. It's normal. Don't need to see a psychologist or a therapist about it. I bounce back quite quickly. So just so we understand, we all go through states of mental distress on a daily basis. They're normal. We don't need to pathologize them. The next bar up, next category is mental health problems. This is much more intense than daily mental distress. Once again, this happens to all of us. Maybe not every day, but we will go through mental health problems. This could be loss of a loved one, could be moving to a new province or country, could be loss of a job, a relationship breakdown, could be grief, and so on. This is when our resilience is tested quite a bit more. So life knocks us down. We're having a little bit harder time bouncing back. Some people will need to see a professional. We recommend that if you're not bouncing back the way you feel like you should be, that's what therapists, psychologists are for. Some people, if you have a really good support network, if you're quite resilient yourself, you might be able to just bounce back on your own. So the concern is, and I know Stan Kuchar talks a lot about this as well, we appear to be heavily medicating mental health problems where really they're predominantly environmental issues that need environmental solutions, not necessarily pharmaceutical. So the final tip of the triangle here is mental disorders and illnesses. These are clinical mental disorders: depression, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, OCD, ADHD, so on and so forth. We know about 20% of the population will develop one of these disorders at some point in their life. So, and the stats are the same with our adolescents. So not everybody will fit into the pink tip of the triangle here. Everybody for sure will be in the blue, green, and yellow. And what we need to understand with this is we do not graduate from one category to the next. A whole bunch of mental distress does not turn into a mental illness. Sometimes there can be no real triggers or factors why someone is developing a mental illness. Sometimes there are, sometimes there aren't. So we just need to keep this in the front of our minds as we're going through the pandemic, because I hear people talk about, and Stan Kuchar actually just talked about this the other day on his Twitter feed, is people are talking about how they're anxious and they're nervous and they're feeling unease about the pandemic, about the next school year. That's normal. You should feel a little bit uneasy about this. It doesn't mean it's an illness. It doesn't even necessarily mean it's a mental health problem. It really is subjective. So just keep this. Hopefully this may have clarified or confirmed some things. If you're familiar with this triangle, then it's just a recap. But language is very powerful, and we need to make sure that if someone's feeling disappointment, that we know the difference between disappointment and depression. We know the difference between nervousness and anxiety, because they're drastically different.
Right. John and I have talked at length about this pyramid, and one of the things that we have talked about is during the pandemic, many of our families have experienced things like job loss, and certainly in New Brunswick, we have the highest rate of intimate partner violence of all the Atlantic provinces. So there are things that are in terms of job loss, in terms of intimate partner violence, in terms of food insecurity, and those types of things. And the other thing that we talked about was the constant inundation by the media. So whether you're online or whether you're watching television or whatever, just being constantly inundated with global pandemic, state of emergency, and those types of things would test anybody. And so talking about how do we limit what we consume so that we can stay resilient, that we can stay well.
Absolutely. Okay, so our next topic, this one's a little bit longer. So the mental health trifecta. This is looking at 3 really foundational pillars for good mental and physical health. And you're probably not going to be new, these, but we're going to look at the reason why we really need to put these front and center. So relationships, movement, and nature. And I keep on, sometimes I want to add more to this list, and there are other things obviously that we need to be working on as well, but I keep on going back to these 3 pillars that are so foundational, because as we're going to find out, we've disconnected from these 3 pieces so much, basically since the baby boomer generation. And we know now, the research is quite strong to show that there's a huge impact with the breakdown of relationships, with the sedentary lifestyle, and the disconnection from nature. So the first one is relationships. And if we look at the top left bullet point, we are the loneliest we've ever been in history. And this is before the pandemic hit. This is January 2020. This has been basically increasing, like I said, since the baby boomer generation. Then you add in a pandemic when we are forced to socially isolate. So people who have been struggling with loneliness, when people ask me, who are struggling during the pandemic, for sure, people who were lonely before, this may exacerbate that situation. And there are other situations where the pandemic has really made life a lot harder. Relationships and connection is integral for good mental and physical health. We're a pack animal. We've evolved in social groups over millennia. And when we start to break away from the pack, we start to isolate, we start to withdraw, or for whatever reasons, we get sick mentally and physically. I was just reviewing the Harvard Grant study, which is an 80-year longitudinal study, and they tracked, and they're still doing it. They're now tracking the offspring and maybe even the grandkids of the original men that were in the study. And a huge piece of mental and physical health is how connected are you socially. So we know now that social health is so important. We need to, so as educators, As much as this presentation is for you and your mental health, we model a lot of stuff and our students pick it up off of us. We need to, if we want to give it, we need to live it. If we want our kids to have good, strong social cohesion, we need to have good, strong social cohesion as parents, as caregivers, as community members, and so on. So this can open up a conversation with your students in the fall. Hopefully in the summertime, if you have the summer off, you can take some time and really look at your relationship, your web of support, and really amplify it as best as you can, because it's a huge piece to our mental and physical health. A quick little activity that you can do, the relationship plus minus, make a T-chart. On the left-hand column, put fill your bucket, people that fill your bucket, people that recharge you, people that when you're done hanging around these people or interacting with them, you just feel better, right? You feel lifted up. Write down the names of people, friends, colleagues, family members, and so on, and make your list as big as you want it to be. On the right-hand side, make a list of people that drain your bucket or drain your battery, that when you hang around these people, you just maybe you don't feel as good, maybe you feel a little bit more drained, and so on. And what I would recommend, you can either physically do this or you can reflect on it. I would say for sure reflect on this. Spend more time with people in the left column. And COVID has slowed life down, which I think is one bonus of this. There's lots of bad stuff, but there's lots of good things that I think have happened as well. It has slowed us down so that we, I think, are starting to make more time for some of these things. We need to build this into our weekly routine. The people that are draining us on the right-hand side of the column, you need to limit your contact with these individuals. We only have a finite amount of energy every day, and if we're constantly surrounding ourselves with people that drain us, that energy is just going out, and it's not good for ourselves, our loved ones, our students, and so on. So really simple activity you can do there. And I would say, I know for myself, I'm constantly reflecting on this. Who do I need to surround myself that lifts me up? Who do I need to avoid a little bit more? Not necessarily cut them out of our lives, but if they're taking more from us than they're giving back, we got to limit contact. So the second pillar in the mental health trifecta is movement. And you can see up in the top left corner, we'll start with the problem and then we'll look at the solutions. We are now the most sedentary today than we ever were in history. Similar to relationships, we have, I would say in the last 100 years, our world has become exceptionally automated. We spend way more time indoors, way more time sitting. I'm sitting right now. I do luckily have a stand-up desk to try to break this up a little bit. This has been happening for the last 100 years. Movement is essential for good mental and physical health. Tons of research out there that has been around for decades. We're built to move. We are a moving species. We're an upright, walking, bipedal species. When we move, it releases the feel-good chemicals in our brain that are protective factors that protect us from some of the adversity we face. My big suggestion here is keep it simple. We don't need to overcomplicate things, which humans tend to do. Keep it simple. Find a type of movement that works for you. I know cognitively that yoga is really, really good. It does not work for me. I'm about as flexible as a 2x4. And I just can't commit to yoga. I know that it's really, really good for my joints, for flexibility, for mental health. But walking and running and biking and hiking, those things work for me. So find whatever works for you, whatever has worked in the past. Try to build in movement. 30 minutes a day is that optimal number. But any bit is better than none. And just try to build this in and you will feel better that much quicker. I am going to just dial in on walking though, because there's a ton of research about mental health benefits of walking. And it's a really simple entry point. I use this for my clients in private practice. They may not have the motivation to go to the gym or go for a run. Walking, you don't need as much motivation, but the benefits are huge. And if you want to look a video on YouTube, it's the walking prescription. It's out of the Kaiser Permanente Institute in California. 2-3 minute video, and it talks about the mental health benefits of vigorous walking 30 minutes a day. So just a little extra resource there. And finally, the nature piece. So the third pillar in the mental health trifecta is nature. Once again, similar to relationships and movement, we are the most disconnected today in 2020 than we've ever been in history from the natural world. This has been happening probably for the last 80 to 100 years. Each generation, we seem to get more and more disconnected. There's a lot of reasons for this. We went from a very rural agrarian lifestyle to a much more metropolitan, urban. The majority, I think 80% of the Canadian population lives within an hour or two of the American border. We have a huge country, so that's a lot of land that's not inhabited by anybody. So nature, once again, it's ingrained in our DNA. The human-made world, not so much, especially the high-tech world we live in now. What nature does, it de-stimulates our brain. And I think we can all agree that we live in an overstimulated world. If you think of visually, auditory, all of our different senses, from noise pollution, from the sound of vehicles and planes and trains, to the smells. If you live in a house, unless you have a lot of plants, there's probably not a lot of natural smells there versus out in a field or in the forest and so on. So nature helps counterbalance that. It's the ultimate recharger. Richard Louv talks about, he's got a lot of good work. He's the guy that coined the term nature deficit disorder. And he talks about we can't fight technology. Technology is here. We need to embrace it. There's a lot of awesome things. What we're doing today is through technology. And that really is the future, regardless if we like it or not. He argues that we need to have a hybrid kind of outlook. And as technology increases, we need to increase our nature time. So as screen time increases, green time increases. And if we keep it at a balance, that's where the magic happens. I feel that, and I know at least in my family, we have to constantly be fighting to get the green time back up where the screen time is. If we do that, that's the magic area. And we need to realize too that nearby nature, we don't have to go on great big hikes or canoe runs, or run a marathon, or no, that'd be the movement piece, I guess. But nature is around us. If you're from New Brunswick, which all of you are, even if you're from St. John or Fredericton or Moncton, I've lived in all those cities, there are beautiful parks within city limits. There are trees around. It could be as simple as going for a walk where there's more trees and less houses. It could be sitting in your backyard and just enjoying the flora and the fauna that's around you. And then if you want the triple whammy, and this one's very powerful, do all three. Go for a walk with a friend in the woods. You're getting relationships, you're getting movement, you're getting nature, you're getting the trifecta all in one. Beauty is there's little to no negative side effects here, tons of benefits, free, and it just makes life that much better.
So, John, I'm just going to jump in and
Yep.
talk a little bit about. So, during the pandemic, while certainly we were busy at EECD, I had an opportunity to do some reading about the whole business of forest bathing. Now, forest bathing is nothing complex. Basically, forest bathing means you take a walk in the woods, or you take a walk in a city park, or you take a walk down a tree-lined street. And that's in essence what it means. And in 1984, in Japan, it became central to the health and wellness of folks. And I just want to share with you a couple of the things that I learned. And I tell you, the reason that I was trying to learn about forest bathing was because we got two puppies over the break. And of course we were in the woods all the time walking these puppies, and so I felt every time I went out and had a walk outside, I came back and I just felt so much more grounded and so much better. My mood was elevated. If there was a problem that I needed to solve, I felt that I was more creative once I came back. There were all kinds of things. So I just want to share with you a couple of the things that being in the woods or being near trees help. So the first thing is it reduces mental fatigue. And it really gives you a brain boost. And so at the University of Michigan, they brought together some undergraduate students and they taught them things. And then what they did was they said to the students, you can go to an arboretum and walk around in nature, or you can walk down basically around a city block. And what they found was the students who had walked around the arboretum retained 30% more of the information than the other students. So I just, that got me to thinking about, well, why don't we use this more in our own teaching? The second thing is the creativity. When you head out into nature, you tend to get a boost of creativity. And one of the things that I'm aware of is that sometimes we have a problem and we sit and we wring our fists and we think, oh my golly, how am I going to solve this problem? But sometimes just being out in nature will cause that increase in creativity that will allow you we call them power walks. We go for a walk around the street, and then oftentimes it doesn't take long before we come up with the solution to the problem.
Where's the survey?
Sorry? Okay. Sorry. The next one is that it certainly improves your happiness, so your mood and your self-esteem. And it's really interesting. If you happen to be near the water, it goes up even further. So your mood and your self-esteem, if you happen to go for a walk and there happens to be a body of water, and coming from Newfoundland and Labrador, there's always bodies of water. And so all of that improves our mood. The next thing is that it boosts our immunity. And so what they found was they had folks who had significant surgeries, and they put them in rooms where they could look out and see greenery. And then they also had rooms that basically looked out onto nothing, to the inside of the hospital. And what they found was the folks who were looking out onto the greenery, not only did they recover more quickly, but they used fewer pain medications. So I think that that's also a really interesting thing for us to think about. The other thing is about sharper vision. What they found in Australia is that they've broken up kids into kids that go outside a lot and kids who really don't go outside a lot. And they looked at myopia, so nearsightedness. And what they found was that children who are outside more are 30 to 40% less likely to develop myopia than other students. And then the last thing they found was that when you engage with nature, fatal diseases are less prevalent. So if you even live close to a green space, those fatal diseases are far less prevalent. Now that all has to do with just being basically in the vicinity of trees and plants. Now, when you add sunshine to it, that really makes things better. So when you add sunshine increases your serotonin, which, as many of you know, that's our happiness hormone. So you go out like days like today and you let the sun shine on you, and then you just naturally feel better. The other thing is that it increases our vitamin D. And vitamin D is really important. It guards against cancers, heart attacks, stroke, multiple sclerosis, and depression. And I always joke about this because I have multiple sclerosis, and I joke about living in Newfoundland and Labrador, where it's, we call it fog, drizzle, and rain. And that's basically what we get most of the time. But what they have found is that in Atlantic Canada, there are higher numbers of multiple sclerosis because people don't get as much vitamin D as possible. And the very last thing is you sleep better. If you've been out in the sun, exposure to the sun helps to streamline our body's circadian rhythms. And so what happens is, after being out in the sun and enjoying lots of sun during the day, of course, with sunscreen, then you end up feeling a lot better and you sleep better. So John, we put a lot of the information that we put about nature. At the end of the slideshow, there are all kinds of resources. So if any of this, if there's a niggling feeling that you're like, gosh, I'd like to know more about that, all of our resources are there so you can help yourselves.
Thank you, Tammy, for that. That was a lot of really good information and much more in depth on the benefits of nature that I think I think we all take for granted, that we do live in a space like New Brunswick that is surrounded by nature. So it's not like um, we're not in, huge big inner cities where it may be a little bit more barriers to get out. It's really literally in our backyards. So hopefully we can increase some more of that with ourselves and our kids and our young ones. Okay, so topic 3 is positive self-talk. And this is really the conversations we have with ourselves. And these are normal. We all have self-talk. We have a kind of a treadmill of self-talk that is going pretty much at all times. The issue is it can become a vortex if it gets into a negative self-talk. But on the flip side, if we have positive self-talk, it can be the antidote to break that vortex up. So this is a little bit of CBT stuff, but I like it because it explains how our thoughts affect our feelings and how they affect our behaviors, and then how it can continue to be either a positive or a negative cycle. So, for instance, this morning, I had a really good sleep last night. I dialing in my sleep hygiene, prioritizing that. Got some sun yesterday, like Tammy said, and maybe that helped me sleep a little bit better. So I woke up this morning and I had some thoughts that, I feel good. It's going to be a great day. It's going to be sunny. It's going to be hot today. I got my shorts and sandals out of storage, and just kind of had some positive thoughts going on in my brain, which then led to my feelings, which I felt happy. I felt joyful. I felt content, which then behavior-wise, what happens is I feel more engaged with my work. I feel more tuned in these sessions than maybe yesterday or the day before when I was a little bit more tired. So it affects my behavior in a positive way. And then that can continue to be a really positive cycle. Then I go home and I felt good. I had good thoughts today. I had good feelings. I had good behaviors, then which creates more good thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. It can be this really positive contagion that happens. The reality is, though, I just read something the other day, about 2/3 of our thoughts every day are negative and not positive. So there is a gravitational pull towards the not so positive. So we really need to work at our self-talk, because the negative stuff can really overpower us quite quickly. It can pull us down into a vortex that can be the same cycle as the positive one I explained. But if you have negative thoughts, if I woke up this morning and, oh, it's going to be a horrible day, it's just going to be a bad week, the weather's brutal, whatever, then I start to feel frustrated, angry, sad, whatever, discontent. And then my behaviors might be, well, I'm not going to really engage in that. I'm not going to go see my friends. And then what happens is this becomes a really negative cycle. So we do have to be cognizant that
All see some of our students who have engaged in this type of negative thoughts, negative feelings, and negative behaviors. I think we've all experienced that.
absolutely. And like I said, it's the first step. I think is becoming aware of our positive, our self-talk in general, and catching ourselves when we may be. It's a little bit trickier. Usually, the feelings we can catch those and go, oh, I'm kind of feeling crappy. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling angry. But we need to back up and look at what were we thinking before that, and then how is that affecting our behaviors and so on, and then trying to maybe have more healthy, positive thinking, because we are a thinking species, and there's a lot of power there, and it can affect. And then if we have a positive cycle, we're more likely to hand that on to our kids. We're more likely to impact our students, and vice versa. If we have a negative vortex going on, we're more likely to hand that on as well. So just some things to think about when we're talking about self-talk. And then I'll hand this over to Tammy about breaking routine.
So one of the things that, of course, we have routines, and the reason we have routines because it makes us efficient, and of course, with our students, it enhances our feelings of security and safety. But what I'd like to talk to you about today is about kind of breaking up that monotony a little bit. And so for example, if I came home today and my partner said, "Hey, why don't we go out for dinner?" Or just different things that
I'm
work.
having a hard time hearing, Tammy.
Oh, you can't hear? Can you hear? John, can you hear?
I can hear you clearly, Tammy. Can you hear both of us, or is it?
Yeah, I could hear Paul. Paul, can you hear me now? He's muted. Okay, I hope.
It's kind of low.
Okay, I'll just.
Dawn was coming through really well.
Okay, and so I'm not coming through as well. Okay, sorry. Um, so I guess okay, I can hear both of you well here. Okay, good. So let's just go to the next slide and talk about how is it that we can break up the monotony of course we have schedules because we want to be efficient and we want to create that secure and safe nature of our classroom. But what are some of the things that we might be able to do just to break up the monotony a little bit? And so things like listening to music or any form of arts. Whether you start your class or the middle of your class or you end the class with a little bit of music or drawing or something that has to do with your curricular outcomes. I think that those are things that might be welcome in a classroom setting. The other thing is start your class with a joke. Now, I come from Newfoundland, and so of course we are joke tellers, and a hearty belly laugh is always a good thing. But if you don't happen to be someone who likes to tell jokes or likes to make things funny, I guarantee that there are children in your classroom who love to tell a joke, who, if you call upon them, they would love to do that type of thing. And sometimes just having a really great laugh makes everybody feel so much better. So that's always something to have in your back pocket. The next thing is to take a stretch break. And ideally, if you can get out in nature and take a stretch break, that's even better. But just even taking a stretch break. I don't know about you all, but since the beginning of March, I have been on a gazillion Skype and Zoom and Teams and all of that, and I find it really draining. And so in between those things, I try to get outside, take my dogs for a walk, and just try to really rejuvenate myself and in that way. And then, of course, the idea of showing gratitude, and I think John mentioned this earlier, but this idea that we can be grateful for things, we can model gratitude, but ultimately what would be ideal is if our students modeled that gratitude. So again, it goes back to that self-talk. You're feeling good and you're thinking great thoughts, and then you're behaving in ways that you are expressing gratitude. And then the last thing is writing a poem. And it's really interesting because in my work with Pride in Education, I have come to know that teenagers love spoken word poetry, and it was really shocking to me that they love spoken word poetry. So whatever it is, just to have that little twist or turn or something that always keeps our students on their toes, and that absolutely we're going to change. We're going to change things up periodically, and it would keep them on their toes. And I see Stuart is saying woot woot pie. Way to go, Stu. And then the next one is all about this idea of volunteerism or experiential learning. So if you go to the next slide, so giving of yourself is a really important thing, and certainly as as we give of ourselves and our students give of themselves, it's a really amazing way to make connections with others and to help other folks. And you know, one of the things I was talking to John yesterday, and I was talking about my mom. And so my mom was a methods and resource teacher. Her entire career, she was a methods and resource teacher. And she, when she retired, she decided that she would get really active in her church. And so she became a deacon in the church. And basically, she went from serving students to now serving the people in her church. So she does things like she teaches classes on bereavement. She does yoga online. She does, I mean, she's amazing, and she's 76 years old. And I think that she'll probably live to, sorry, she'll probably live to be 80 or 90 or 100, because she's always in servitude to others, which is absolutely amazing. So if you want to think about doing this, John, can we just go to the next slide? So if you want to think about engaging your students in volunteerism, the mental health benefits are really amazing. So I would encourage you, depending on where you live, to reach out to some of the volunteer organizations in your area. So whether it's an immigrant serving agency, so for example, in Moncton, it would be Magma. Here in Fredericton, it would be the Multicultural Association of Fredericton. There are 13 of them across the province, so certainly you could get involved in that way. But there are tons of other volunteer organizations, the SPCA, there's a million, folks who help the homeless and so on. The next one is food insecurity programs. If you decide, you know what, I really don't want to leave my school, I just want to stay right here in my school, but I want my students to be involved in something that's worthwhile. Certainly food insecurity programs. So whether it's a breakfast program, a lunch program, or a backpack program on the weekend, those are amazing things to get students involved in. And I just would want to bring your attention to, in many areas of the province now, we have ensured that the food insecurity programs meet the needs of the clients that they're serving. So for example, that they're halal, or that they're kosher, and so on and so forth. Because again, we don't want to send a backpack home of food and the food not be something that the family could eat. So again, all of these things, and students are amazing at looking through all of the details and helping to get things packaged and so on and so forth. The other thing is, I would encourage you, because as you know, as you're teaching a class, you know, Sally's interested in that, and John is interested in that, and so on and so forth. I just told you I have a whole propensity around forest bathing. But as we understand what students are engaged, or what really makes them tick, getting those opportunities for them in the community, and making those connections so they can start to volunteer. And as you know, certainly as they get to applying for scholarships and applying for universities and applying for colleges and all of those things, any type of volunteerism, of course, is absolutely amazing. The next thing I want to talk about is exploring employment. So if you know that you have a student who is absolutely interested, so for example, at EECD, we're very much involved in essential skills, which is an alternate pathway through high school. And the idea there is that students really focus in on what it is they want to do. So let's imagine you want to do automotive. We get students not only developing the skills, but we also have that experiential learning opportunity for them. We have students who are interested in things like early childhood education, personal support worker, all of those. These are all really key things. And if we can get them connected to the world of work, all the better, right? And then I wanted to also let you know about iHub, or the Innovation Hub. The Innovation Hub gives out money to folks who engage in experiential learning or volunteerism. And if you were to look up, just type in iHub, you'll get their website. And Dr. Ross Ledbetter, who used to work with us at the department, is overseeing that work right now. And you can get upwards of $1,000 to really do this well. And there are a few things you have to do. You have to do a survey before, and then your students have to do a survey afterward. But again, for $1,000, it really is not a taxing endeavor. And then the last thing is just helping folks in need. And what we have seen with volunteerism and with essential skills and other things, what we have seen is that our students are quite extraordinary. So I don't know if you know this, but across the province, as Black Lives Matter become increasingly important, I'm not sure if you know, but it's our students who have created these rallies all across the province. And it's really helping folks in need. That is something that really truly will always benefit your mental health. And I think that this is something that if we can get folks engaged in this in some way, I think that it will be amazing.
Okay, so we're wrapping up our last topic here now, and it's going to kind of gather everything that we talked about so far today and any other background knowledge or prior knowledge you have in regards to wellness and mental health. And now we're taking that information, which is really only as good as how much you apply it into your day-to-day, weekly, monthly routines. So I would ask that you think of it from two lenses. One, think of the mental health piece personally, yourself. So take off the helper hat for a second and think of your personal mental health. Because we know there's lots of evidence to support that you need to live it to give it. If you are not mentally fit, and you're trying to help kids become mentally fit through all kinds of different means as an educator, it's going to be less likely. If you're modeling this, if you're living it, then the chances of you giving it to the kids is going to be that much more. So, and that's the same as with parenting and so on. So think of the stuff we talked about today. Think about other things you know about mental health. And I'm sure you all have a wealth of knowledge in the fields of wellness in general, mental and physical. And we're going to look at some SMART goals, which you all will be familiar with, but we'll quickly talk about the path to positive change. And positive change is what we want. I don't think we'll ever master it. I know I sure as heck have not mastered yet, and I don't plan to. It's a work in progress all the time. But when we break it down, we're either in one of these three categories. We're either wishing for change, and I think at the end of December, a whole lot of people, probably across the world, are wishing for change because you got New Year's resolutions coming up. But if we are wishing, we're just basically thinking about it. We're in that pre-contemplative or maybe contemplative stage in regards to change. If we only stay in the wish category, we're probably not going to make a whole lot of change. If we're wanting for change, we're now contemplating it. We're starting to maybe even have a plan of action. So if I want to lose weight January 1st or in the new year, I'm looking at gyms, I'm looking at diets, I'm looking at different things I can do. I'm starting to plan. Then the magic happens when we get into the commitment phase. That's where I like the saying is, what's the best diet out there? The one you can commit to over a long period of time. What's the best workout regimen? The one you can commit to over a long period of time. It really, the devil is not in the details in this per se. It's really commitment is the key. It's the exact same stuff with mental health. We know in therapy as well, commitment to therapy, commitment to your homework, and so on is the key. Keep in mind though, because we can be really hard on ourselves, it's not a matter of, oh, I'm going to commit to this new self-care regimen and I'm good to go. If you're anything like me, it's really falling off the wagon and getting back on, falling off, getting back on. The key is that you just keep on trying to get back on the wagon and recommit. It's not good when we just say, oh, well, I'm just going to give up and I'm not going to bother trying anymore. So wish, want, commit. Goal setting helps us dial into that commitment phase. And that's what we'll go over here for the rest of the session. So wellness goals. So like I said, you're probably familiar. I'm assuming you're familiar with SMART goals from the educational context, professional goals, and so on. It's the same idea. We're just looking at setting wellness goals for our own self-care. And once again, don't ask your students to do this if you don't personally do it yourself, because you got to live it to give it. But if you personally embrace this, then you introduce that into your classroom. You can talk from experience, say, hey guys, you know what? I've set a lot of wellness goals this summer and it's really helped. And it's helped kind of calm down some of that unpredictable, the over worrying and so on that they may be dealing with. Then you're going to get a lot more buy-in. So why is goal setting important? It gives us something to work towards. It gives us purpose. We are purpose hungry species. When we don't have a lot of purpose, that can be a little bit tricky, or we can fall down some rabbit holes. It keeps us motivated, focused, and on task. When we achieve the goal, it feels good. And I was telling Tammy yesterday, I'm very goal oriented. It just comes quite natural now. It can be as simple as me crossing off something on my to-do list. That could be email Tammy about presentation. I cross that off at the end of the day. That feels good. That's a very basic, small goal, but there's that accomplishment piece, right? I accomplished something today. And it increases our grit and our perseverance. So that's what we want in ourselves, especially during these unpredictable times and where we don't know when we're going to get back to full normal. We need people that are gritty and persevering, that don't give up, that they may fall off the wagon, like I said, but you keep jumping back. You keep jumping back on. And there's a lot of learning in that. I think there's a ton of learning in failure, in struggle as well. So, and the saying I like is, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. So that's that grittiness, that's that perseverance as well. And goal setting can help us get there. And so SMART goals, this should just be a recap for all of you. Make sure they're specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. I know for myself, the goal setting process is as important as the actual goal you're setting. So when we set really vague goals or not measurable or attainable, that can impede upon our ability to actually maybe reach these goals. So a bad example of a goal, a wellness goal. So if this was mine, I will exercise. So that's quite vague. It's not specific. You can't really measure that because we're not talking about what type of exercise, how often, how long. It looks like it could be attainable. It's foggy what it's looking to attain. It's probably relevant. So for me, it is, but there's no timeline on when you plan to meet this goal. So goal setting, and as much as I'm sure you're probably inundated with SMART goals, there is a real process to it. And I've used this when I was in the schools with students. We used to do monthly SMART goals or wellness goals. And I felt it really was, there was a lot of positive benefits once kids understood how to set a SMART goal. And once again, we have to model that ourselves. So let's rewrite this goal. How can we make it a bit more specific, measurable, and time-based? So instead of I will exercise, I will run 3 times a week for at least 30 minutes each session. So this is a goal of mine. It's very specific. We're talking about running. We're talking about the duration. We're talking about the frequency. We can measure this. That's important. It's attainable. So that's another one too. And when we're setting goals ourselves and working with our kids, there's really a kind of the sweet spot. We don't want the bar to be so low that they basically accomplish the goal within the first hour of setting it. We don't want the bar to be so high that we're setting them for failure. And sometimes this takes, I know at least the kids I work with, took them a couple rounds of setting goals and some work with, hey, you know what, maybe the bar is a little high there, Johnny. Or maybe the bar is a little low there, Johnny. Let's bring it up a little bit. Make sure it's relevant to them and not the adults yourself. Make sure it's relevant to you. Then you're going to get that buy-in and commitment. And make sure there's a timeline. When are you going to check or cross this goal off? that you've accomplished it. So obviously a big review, but I do work with enough teachers, and I've done a lot of goal setting, and I still see people when they set their goals, they're missing a lot of these pieces. So goal setting is as important as the goal itself. When we're looking at goals, we can basically stretch them out to the macro view, or we can dial them right into the micro. So you can take a yearly goal, and maybe your goal is, so January 1st, my goal is to lose 30 pounds in 2020. Then you can take that goal and break it down monthly. Maybe you want to lose X amount of weight every month. Break it down weekly. I want to lose 2 pounds a week. And then daily, you can break this right down to the hour. I use a mixture of all different types. I set some yearly goals and kind of just have them on my whiteboard. I set a lot of weekly goals, or at least my to-do list. And then sometimes I'll just say, no, I need to accomplish this by the afternoon today. So I'll jot some stuff down. So use the spectrum there, what works for you. I don't know if I had the slide here. I'm a big believer in to-do lists. I like the old school to-do list, just a notebook. My system is I rewrite my to-do list every Monday morning. Whatever I accomplish, great, I cross it off. I've never ever got to zero. It's just an ever evolving thing. It keeps me motivated. Find a system that works for you. There's lots of digital apps, calendars, but find something that can keep you on track. And another piece of recommendation is, when you're setting a goal, particularly a wellness goal, reach out to someone close in your circle and say, hey, you know what? I'm really going to try to dial in my self-care regimen, and I set this goal. Can you just check in on me every once in a while? You're going to have more accountability if you have a spouse, or even maybe your son or daughter, or a close friend or a colleague. When we make our goals a little bit more public, and we publish them, even if it's within our close groups, we have some accountability. Our likelihood of meeting that goal is going to be better, and we have some support. We don't feel like we're alone in the process. So that's another tip there. So a lot of information today, and this is really scratching the surface. There's lots of great stuff out there. Take the nuggets, the gems that you liked from today. Like I said, the PL is only as good as you taking the information and applying it to your day-to-day living. And if you want, I really like this, and I live by this mantra, if you want profound results in life, do the simple things extraordinarily well. We as humans fall victim to overcomplicating or paralysis by overanalysis. We're really good at that. And there's times when things need to be complicated. There's a lot of times when we are really just missing the ball, and we need to just do the simple stuff really, really, really good. And that's the pathway to profound results. So with that, on behalf of Tammy and I, and Tammy will, as I'm sure as well, I'd like to thank all of you for signing up for the session and for engaging. And I know myself, reach out to Tammy. Tammy, anything else to say?
I'm on mute, sorry.
Yep.
I just wonder if there are any questions. I wonder if anybody wants to make a comment. You'll see our resource list here and so on and so forth. But I'm just wondering if there are any questions or concerns or anything that we brought up that's rattling around for you that you'd like to ask about. Okay. So what we are going to do is, as I said, we have recorded this, so I will send this John's way. He'll make it all beautiful, and certainly if you reach out to myself, tammy.strong@gnb.ca or john.fletcher@nba.nb.ca, we can certainly send it your way.